For 22 years, they stepped over me in the hallway without ever looking down, cracked jokes behind my back like I couldn't hear them, and never once said my name, not until the day I walked into the boardroom, looked each of them in the eye, and fired 5 of them without raising my voice. No one ever really saw me. To them, I was just there, pushing a mop down the hallway at Brightline Systems in Newark, New Jersey. I was the quiet guy in the gray uniform, the one wiping down glass doors before the sun came up, rolling a yellow cart past cubicles filled with people pretending to change the world, while I changed the trash bags under their desks. Some called me M, some didn't bother calling me anything at all. Most didn't even know I had a last name. And that was fine. That was the point. They liked things clean. Polished floors. Smudge-free conference tables. Shiny coffee pots in the break room that magically stayed full. But they never asked who kept it that way. They never asked why the same man showed up at 9 p.m., 6 nights a week, for over 2 decades, without a day off, without a complaint, without ever joining a single birthday cupcake gathering in the kitchen. "Hey, you missed a spot," one manager once joked, laughing as he deliberately spilled his latte on the floor in front of me and walked away like it was clever. I looked at the stain, dropped to one knee, and wiped it clean like it didn't bother me, like it didn't burn. But it did. Not because of the words. Because of how familiar they were. For 22 years, I moved through that building like a shadow. I didn't speak unless spoken to. Didn't linger. Didn't ask for favors. I showed up, cleaned up, locked up, and left before most of them ever got out of bed. Even the badge scanner at the front desk beeped at me like it was tired of seeing my face. But what they didn't know, what no one ever thought to ask, was who I was before the mop. Before the uniform. Before the silence. They didn't know I used to fix circuit boards in my garage. That I once ran a small repair business on South Orange Avenue until a bad deal and worse luck pulled the rug out from under me. They didn't know I had a son I hadn't seen in 15 years, or that I once spent weekends teaching him how to take apart radios just to understand how they worked. They didn't know about the wife I lost. The home I lost. The voice I used to have. So I stopped speaking. And I started listening. I listened as the executives laughed in their glass offices, thinking no one could hear them. I listened as managers joked about laying off departments over lunch. I listened to the whispers in the break room, the late-night calls no one thought twice about, the whiteboards half-erased with numbers that didn't add up, and memos left in printers that told stories they didn't mean to share. And I remembered every single one of them. I didn't study finance. I studied people. And what I saw was a company bloated with ego, rotting from the inside, covered in nice words and mission statements that nobody actually lived by. Brightline Systems was profitable, sure, but it was messy. And no one at the top noticed. But I did. While I scrubbed their floors and emptied their trash, I watched them. Learned their patterns. Took notes in an old leather notebook I kept hidden behind the cleaning supplies in the janitor's closet. Not full sentences, just names, percentages, behavior. Quiet math. Observations. There was one night, a few years back, that changed everything. A board member visiting from out of town left his notes on a presentation in a meeting room. Budget projections, buyout rumors, names of investors. They were supposed to be confidential. I wasn't supposed to understand a word. But I did. That night, I went home, sat at my tiny kitchen table, and stared at the wall for hours. And the thought that came to me was simple. If I move slow. If I stay silent. If I keep my head down just a little longer. I can flip this entire company on its head. And nobody will see it coming. The plan didn't come to me like lightning, it came like a slow leak. A quiet drip of realization that turned into a current I couldn't ignore. I didn't know when exactly I decided to do it, but I remember the moment I knew I couldn't keep doing nothing. It was one of those nights when the city air clings to your skin and everything smells like tired electricity. I just finished mopping the executive floor when I saw a forgotten folder left on the table in one of the conference rooms. Open. Unlocked. Careless. Inside were printouts from a presentation deck. Forecasts. Equity breakdowns. Investor notes. I wasn't supposed to understand what I was looking at, but I did. Years of listening had taught me their language. And what I saw on those pages, the fragility, the oversight, the arrogance, told me one thing: the company looked strong, but the foundation was cracked. And no one was watching. Not really. Except me. That night, I opened my notebook and wrote one word in big, heavy letters: leverage. The next day, I made a call I hadn't made in nearly 15 years. Darius Cole. We served together in the National Guard. He went one way, finance, big city, fast life. I went the other. Survival. Janitor. Ghost. We hadn't spoken in a long time. He owed me a favor. One that came with history and weight. We met in a diner off Route 21 just after midnight. I showed up in uniform, still smelling faintly of ammonia and silence. He walked in wearing a tailored coat, watch I couldn't afford to pronounce, and a face that said he hadn't thought about me in over a decade, but he still respected me enough to sit down. He asked, "What happened to you?" I just looked at him and said, "I've been paying attention." I laid out my notes. The patterns. The projections. The names. Not everything, just enough. Enough to make him blink. Enough to make him lean in. He listened. At first, he thought I was losing it. But the more I talked, the quieter he got. Eventually, he said, "You wanna buy in?" And I looked at him, without blinking, and said, "No. I want to own it. Not today. Not tomorrow. But eventually." We started small. A shell company. Pine Street Equity. Registered clean. Darius listed as CEO. No trail leading back to me. I funneled in everything I had. My savings. The last of an inheritance from an uncle I never met. Even sold off my truck, the same one I used to drive my son to school before he stopped calling me dad. We bought less than 0.5% of Brightline's private shares. Just a whisper. Not enough to be noticed. But enough to exist. I went to work that night like nothing had changed. Pushed the mop. Took out the trash. Nodded at people who still didn't know my name. But something had changed. Because now, I was in the room. Not physically, but on paper. And paper is where the power starts. While they were building pitch decks and eating catered lunch, I was watching how they treated each other. Not just how they treated me, that was obvious, but how they moved when no one they considered important was looking. I saw managers who blamed interns for their mistakes. VPs who couldn't remember their assistants' names. Team leads who stayed late not out of passion, but because they were terrified to leave early. I wasn't eavesdropping. I was learning. Every spilled latte. Every careless email left open on a glowing monitor. Every fragment of a whispered conversation on a Bluetooth headset at 11:45 p.m. All of it told me the same thing. This company was not run by the smartest people. It was run by the loudest. The boldest. The most invisible when it came time to take responsibility. I didn't get mad. I took notes. I remembered what one of the IT guys said once, didn't even know I was standing behind the vending machine when he said it. He laughed and told his coworker, "If I owned this place, I'd clean house. Start from scratch." I didn't laugh. Because I was already cleaning. I just had a different definition of the word. It was a Tuesday night, one of those long, heavy ones where Newark's heat doesn't know how to quit even after the sun disappears. The sky was thick with leftover daylight, the kind that stains the horizon like an old bruise. The building was quiet, as usual, the hum of vending machines, the buzz of lights no one turned off, the occasional voice from a conference room echoing off the polished floors. I had just finished mopping the third-floor bathrooms. My arms ached. I'd been fighting off the same dull headache for 3 days, probably dehydration or just the kind of fatigue you stop noticing after working the same job for 22 years. I rolled the cart slowly, my mind already 10 minutes ahead, thinking about which rooms were next, whether I had enough degreaser in the back, whether I'd need to refill the mop bucket one more time before the night was done. I approached the executive wing like I always did, quiet, focused, almost invisible. And then it happened. The front wheel of my cart caught the edge of the doorframe leading into conference room B. A small mistake. A half-second of imbalance. But the bucket didn't forgive it. It tipped forward. Not all the way, just enough to let the soapy water slide out like a wave across the marble floor. It spread fast, loud and sudden, a slap of reality on an otherwise perfect night. Inside the room, a group of mid-level managers were rehearsing an investor presentation. Laptops open. Suits loosened. Glasses half full. And at the head of the table, as always, was Grayson Black, polished, loud, always a little too proud of himself. The moment the water hit the floor, he looked up, and then he smiled. Not the kind of smile you give when you understand something went wrong. Not even the kind you offer when you want to seem gracious. This was different. It was cruel. He stood up, slowly, like he was waiting for an audience to notice. Then he said it. Jesus, Marcus. Can you not keep the damn water in the bucket? The others chuckled. One of them shook their head. Another took a sip of their drink, like this was just a commercial break from their own brilliance. This is why you people stay where you are, he added, loud enough to echo. I didn't react. Not visibly. I reached into my cart, pulled out the towels, and dropped to my knees. I started soaking up the water, slow, methodical, practiced. My hands moved while my mind screamed. Not in rage. In clarity. Because this wasn't new. I'd been laughed at before. Ignored. Talked down to. Treated like background noise in the very building I knew better than half the people who worked there. But this time, something changed. Because this time, I had something they didn't know about. Ownership. It was just a sliver. A crack in the wall. But it was mine. And it meant that their words, their laughter, their smug smirks, they no longer had weight. Not real weight. Not the kind that could hold me down. I finished cleaning the floor. Stood up. Rolled the cart away without looking back. And didn't speak a single word. That night, in the janitor's closet, I sat on the old milk crate I'd been using as a chair for years. I opened my notebook. The one with the leather cover and the frayed edges. The one they'd never seen. The one that had more secrets in it than any whiteboard on the 6th floor. I turned to a clean page and wrote a name. Grayson Black. Then I drew a line under it. Then I started writing numbers. Not random. Not guesses. Numbers tied to shares. Timelines. Names of small investors we hadn't reached out to yet. Percentages of voting control. Thresholds for mandatory disclosure. Because that night, I realized something that had been growing in me for a long time. I wasn't just trying to be part of this company. I was going to take it. Not because I wanted power. Not even because I wanted respect. But because I was done waiting for people like Grayson Black to change. They weren't going to change. They had no reason to. So I would change the room instead. That was the night the plan stopped being an idea. That was the night it became a promise. After that night, after the bucket and the laughter and the silence that wrapped itself around my ribs like wire, I stopped thinking in weeks and started thinking in moves. The plan that had been crawling forward, slow, quiet, hidden, suddenly found its legs. Because I realized I couldn't wait 3 more years for people like Grayson Black to step down or age out or suddenly find a conscience. They weren't going anywhere. So I had to move faster. Smarter. Darius didn't argue when I called him the next morning. I told him, we need more names. More shells. More silence. And he got to work. We created 3 new holding companies, all clean, all untraceable, each with its own bank account, mailing address, and figurehead. We paid retired professionals, quiet, modest folks with no connections to Brightline, to stand as the public faces. Teachers. Accountants. A former nurse from Trenton who just wanted to help someone shake up the system. None of them asked too many questions. That was part of the deal. While they posed on paper, I kept moving through hallways and break rooms, pushing my cart, picking up discarded documents, listening to the conversations no one meant for me to hear. They still didn't see me. That was the gift. That was the advantage. By the end of the quarter, the network we built, Pine Street, River Step, Hollow Creek, quietly controlled just over 5% of Brightline systems. It wasn't enough to take over. Not yet. But it was enough to get in the room. Enough to start raising eyebrows if anyone had been paying attention. But no one was. They were too busy throwing leadership luncheons and ordering new espresso machines for the executive lounge. And me? I was still mopping floors. But now I was reading board reports. Now I was learning voting schedules. Now I was watching the machine from the inside, and taking notes on every gear that slipped. It came quietly, like most warnings do. No sirens. No confrontation. Just a call from Darius on a Tuesday morning while I was walking out of the building, uniform still damp, fingers stiff from a night of mopping. He didn't say hello. He said, they noticed. That was all it took to stop me cold in the parking lot. My body didn't move, but my heart did, like it had just remembered what risk felt like. He explained it fast. Some junior compliance analyst flagged a pattern, too many companies buying small, private blocks of shares within the same time frame. Similar paperwork. Similar structures. Too similar. They hadn't traced it back to me. Not yet. But they were asking questions. Running reports. Connecting dots. I sat in my car, keys in my hand, but I didn't start the engine. I just stared at the windshield and thought about everything I'd built, everything I'd risked. The years of silence. The sacrifice. The notebooks full of details no one else had seen. It could all vanish if I walked away now. And maybe that would have been the safer move. But I wasn't building safety. I was building truth. So I said, I'm not running. I'm not hiding. It's time. That weekend, I sat at my kitchen table, surrounded by folders, receipts, statements. I organized everything. Verified each piece. Drew the line from every LLC straight back to me, not in secrets, not in shadows, but in bold black ink. By Monday morning, I had one document, full disclosure. Ownership. Authenticated. Signed. And for the first time in 22 years, I walked through Brightline's front doors in a suit. When I stepped into the elevator that morning, wearing a navy blue suit that hadn't seen daylight in 10 years, I felt the weight of every night I'd pushed a mop through this place, every hallway I'd walked without being seen. The ride to the top floor was smooth, silent, almost too clean. I'd only ever used the service elevator before, the one in the back, the one that rattled and smelled like metal and dust. But today I wasn't here to clean. I was here to be heard. Security didn't recognize me. They reached for their radios until someone upstairs buzzed them and said I was expected. I didn't explain who I was. I didn't offer a name. I just waited as they opened the glass doors and let me walk into the same boardroom where I'd once wiped spilled coffee off a chair no one said thank you for using. Inside, they were all seated. The CEO, Olivia Perrin, stood as I entered, trying to mask the confusion in her eyes with the kind of strained smile executives use when they realize they've missed something important. The others followed her lead. No one spoke at first. They just stared, like I was a mistake on the schedule. Olivia cleared her throat and said, "Mr. Bell, we weren't aware." I raised a hand, not to silence her, but to set the tone. "I'm not here to be congratulated," I said, and placed a single manila folder on the polished table. "I'm here to make some corrections." The room shifted. Inside the folder were 4 signed termination letters, effective immediately. No negotiation. No warning. No courtesy meetings. Just truth in ink. The first was for Grayson Black. I looked him straight in the eye. "You forgot my name for 20 years, I said. "But I never forgot yours. I remember every time you mocked me, every time you treated people like they were beneath you. You created a culture of arrogance. That ends today." He didn't speak. Just stared. Pale. Frozen. Next was Morgan Leaks, compliance director. "You let 2 janitors go for clocking in late one time, but protected your own team through months of missed deadlines and poor performance," I said. "You called it fairness. I call it selective blindness. You're done." Then came Dana Briggs, head of communications. She once sent out a company-wide email celebrating equity and inclusion, the same week she told someone I was just the floor guy, probably doesn't even read. "You talk about company culture," I said. "But you helped poison it. And I won't let that continue." Finally, Kendari Voss, internal strategy. "You cut budgets for maintenance, slashed staff hours, but ordered leather chairs for conference rooms. You smiled at the numbers and ignored the people. That stops now." One by one, their faces dropped. No one protested. No one defended. Because they knew. They all knew. Then I turned to the rest of the board. "These decisions are not emotional," I said. "They're structural. This company needs to start again, not with a new logo, not with a motivational campaign, but with actual accountability." Olivia tried to recover the moment. "Mr. Bell, this is highly irregular." I looked at her calmly. "No. What's irregular is what you've let slide for the past decade. What's irregular is a culture that rewards appearance over character. I didn't build this place, but I'm the one cleaning it now, from the inside out." There was nothing left to say that I could have stayed. I had the numbers, the board support, the final word. I could have rebranded the company under my name, taken the top floor office, hired a personal driver, sat at every executive table like a king who rose from a mop bucket. But none of that ever mattered to me. I didn't come here for power. I came to fix what I could. And when that was done, I felt it. Not satisfaction. Not pride. Something quieter. Something heavier. Peace. The weeks that followed moved differently. Meetings became smaller, but louder in meaning. Department heads began listening, really listening, to the people they used to overlook. Security guards got thank yous. The overnight cleaning team was included in every staff memo. New hires were told on their first day, learn everyone's name, especially the people who open the building before you arrive. I stayed just long enough to make sure it stuck. I raised the wages of every janitor in the building. I added real health benefits to the night crew. I gave Roy Chen, the man who quietly ran the maintenance staff for more than a decade, an official title, a proper desk, and an office with a window. And I asked HR to pull every unresolved internal complaint filed in the last 5 years. Every single one got reopened. Reviewed. Repaired. Then I turned to the one thing that mattered most, succession. I didn't want another executive clone in charge. I didn't want someone slick in a suit pretending to care. I wanted someone who saw people. Really saw them. So I chose Leah Armstrong. She was an accountant. Quiet. Focused. Kind. She used to leave me cookies during holidays and always said goodnight on her way out, even when I was wiping the floor behind her. I watched her work late for years without ever asking for credit. That's who I trusted. I brought her into the loop slowly. Gave her access to the right files. Sat with her in long conversations about what leadership actually meant. And when the time came, I transferred my voting power to her, not in a press release, not with applause, just a single signed page slid into the bottom drawer of her new desk. I left Brightline the same way I arrived, quietly. No farewell party. No name on a wall. Just a nod to the receptionist, a last walk through the halls, and a car ride out past the city limits where no one knew who I was or what I'd done. I volunteer now. Teach math at the public library. Work in a community garden. I live small. That's all I ever needed. They say some people change the world with their voice. But sometimes, it's the ones who say nothing for 20 years. Who leave the deepest mark. Because if you want to know the truth about a place, ask the person who cleans it. And if you want to fix it, watch first. Then act. But only when the moment is right.